The bank manager's face drained of all color. His hands shook as he reached for the phone. "Secure the entrance," he instructed his assistant, voice barely steady. "And contact the authorities immediately." He stared at me as if I'd placed a ticking bomb on his desk rather than my deceased grandfather's weathered account book. The same account book my mother had discarded just yesterday, dismissing it as worthless garbage that should have remained buried with him. She'd been so certain it meant nothing. Turns out some secrets refuse to stay buried, and some of them have consequences. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm 29 years old, and until that morning, I thought the most eventful part of my week would be negotiating with my landlord about the malfunctioning heating system in my apartment. I work as a legal assistant at a modest firm in Cleveland, Ohio. It's not glamorous work. The compensation is unremarkable. My vehicle is 11 years old and produces a noise reminiscent of a distressed marine mammal every time I make a right turn. But I excel at my position because I notice details. I pursue questions. I don't abandon investigation until I find resolution. My family has always viewed this as a personal failing. The memorial service was on a Thursday. My grandfather, Martin Morrison, had passed away at 87 years old. He'd lived on a quiet farm about 90 minutes outside the city, the kind of property with a covered front porch and fields extending to the tree line. Everyone assumed he possessed nothing of value, just an elderly man in an aging house, spending his final years in peaceful obscurity. That's certainly what my mother preferred everyone to believe. The service was small, efficient, and emotionally sterile, exactly Helen's style. My mother has always treated emotions as weakness, and memorial services are no exception. She organized everything like a business conference. 25 minutes for the ceremony, 40 minutes for the reception, then everyone disperses. No lingering, no excessive grief. The catering came from an establishment that apparently believed mayonnaise qualified as a primary ingredient. My grandmother would have risen from her own grave just to criticize the coleslaw. She had standards. Helen does not. My sister Amanda appeared 35 minutes late, wearing a designer outfit that cost more than my monthly rent. She blamed traffic. The farmhouse has a gravel parking area the size of 2 football fields. But sure, Amanda, traffic. She barely appeared somber. Then again, Amanda has never excelled at emotions that don't directly serve her interests. She embraced our mother, greeted a few people, and spent most of the reception monitoring her phone, probably checking her portfolio. Amanda loves discussing her investment portfolio. I stood observing my family perform grief like amateur theater, and I thought about my grandfather. Martin Morrison had been an accountant for 38 years. Numbers were his native language. He could examine a balance sheet and perceive narratives that others overlooked. He was also a chess enthusiast, and an excellent one. He taught me the game when I was 8 years old, sitting on that covered porch with a board between us and sweet tea sweating in the summer humidity. He used to say that chess wasn't about capturing pieces. It was about creating positions, setting traps, having the patience to wait for your opponent's error. His favorite maxim was this: truth is patient. It outlasts every deception. I never fully understood what he meant, not until that week. 3 weeks before his death, I visited him at the farmhouse. He was frail, his body failing, but his eyes remained sharp, focused, alive. He gripped my hand with surprising strength and pulled me close. His voice was barely audible, but every word was intentional. "The account book," he whispered. "In my study. The chess manual. Only you, Rachel. Promise me." I promised. I didn't comprehend, but I promised. After the memorial service, the family gathered at the farmhouse. Helen was already surveying the rooms, discussing potential sales, evaluating property values like the body wasn't even cold yet. Amanda nodded along, occasionally contributing suggestions. They'd clearly discussed this beforehand, probably while Grandpa was still breathing. I slipped away to his study. It was a compact room, lined with bookshelves, smelling of aged paper and pipe tobacco. Grandpa hadn't smoked in 18 years, but the scent lingered. I located the chess manual immediately. Advanced Endgame Strategies. A comprehensive guide. It had been his favorite. We'd analyzed the positions in that book countless times. I pulled it from the shelf and immediately noticed something wrong. It felt too heavy. I opened it and my breath caught. The pages had been hollowed out. Inside rested an old leather account book, worn at the edges. the kind you might discover in an estate sale. It appeared ancient, like an artifact from another era. I brought it to the living room, curious, wanting to share this discovery with my family. That was my mistake. Helen saw it before I could speak. Her reaction was immediate. Too fast, too sharp. She crossed the room in 4 strides, snatched it from my hands, and barely glanced at it before throwing it directly into the kitchen trash. "This is garbage," she declared. "Obsolete accounts that don't exist anymore. This should have stayed buried with him. Don't go rifling through his belongings, Rachel. It's inappropriate." Amanda laughed from the sofa. "Always the sentimental one, aren't you, Rach?" They exchanged a look, brief, almost invisible, but I caught it. I've spent 7 years working at a law firm. I've witnessed that look before. It's the look people share when they're concealing something, when they're afraid someone is getting too close to what they want hidden. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying my mother's reaction. If the account book was worthless, why the anger? Why not mere dismissal? Why did she need to discard it so quickly, so decisively? And I kept thinking about my grandfather, his sharp eyes, his deliberate words. He'd been an accountant for 38 years. He didn't make mistakes with numbers or documentation. If he'd hidden that account book in a hollowed chess manual and told only me about it, there was a reason. People only react with anger when they have something to hide. At 5:30 in the morning, I made my decision. I was returning to that farmhouse. That account book was still in the trash, and I was going to discover why my mother wanted it buried so desperately. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I see everything. Thank you for your support. The drive to the farmhouse took 90 minutes in the gray pre-dawn light. I kept the radio silent. I needed to think. My grandfather was many things. Patient, methodical, strategic. He'd spent 38 years as an accountant, tracking numbers, identifying discrepancies, documenting everything. He played chess like someone who could anticipate 20 moves ahead. He didn't act randomly. He didn't hide account books in hollowed manuals and whisper cryptic instructions unless there was purpose. And my mother didn't discard things with that much aggression unless she was frightened. I arrived at the farmhouse just as first light broke over the fields. The sky painted itself in shades of violet and amber. No other vehicles. No one around. Perfect. I let myself in with the spare key Grandpa kept under the 4th porch step. The house was silent, still, like it was holding its breath. I went straight to the kitchen. The trash can was exactly where I'd left it. I pulled out the bag, set it on the floor, and started searching. There I was, a grown woman with a college degree, elbow deep in garbage, at 5:45 in the morning, like some kind of raccoon in business attire. My grandfather would have been amused. My therapist would have had concerns. The account book was near the bottom, beneath coffee grounds and paper napkins from the memorial reception. I pulled it out, cleaned it with my sleeve, and examined it properly for the first time. The leather cover was old and worn, designed to appear decades old. But when I opened it, something was inconsistent. The account number inside didn't match the vintage appearance. The format was wrong. Too many digits, too contemporary. And then I found the note. Tucked into the spine of the account book, folded into a tiny square, was paper in my grandfather's precise handwriting. Account number 885233341. They don't know about this one. Request the complete history. Trust no one in the family. Only you, Rachel. I read it 4 times. They don't know. Meaning Helen, meaning Amanda. My grandfather had concealed something from his own family. He had trusted only me to discover it. I photographed everything. The account book, the note, the account number. I uploaded them to cloud storage immediately. Working at a law firm teaches certain habits. Documents can be destroyed. Files can disappear. But digital backups are permanent. I drove home with the account book in my bag and questions burning in my mind. The first call came at 9:45 in the morning. Helen. Her voice was sweet, concerned, maternal, everything she isn't. "Just checking on you after yesterday," she said. "Such a difficult day for all of us." I waited. There was more coming. "You didn't take anything from the farmhouse, did you? Everything belongs to the estate now. We need to inventory it properly before the sale." I lied smoothly. "Just one of Grandpa's chess manuals for memories." There was a pause. I could hear her calculating, deciding whether to press further. Then her voice relaxed slightly. "Good. That's fine, but don't go searching through his things anymore, Rachel. Some things are better left undisturbed. Your grandfather wasn't well. He wasn't himself these last few years. His mind was deteriorating. He didn't always distinguish what was real from what wasn't. I said nothing, but internally I was screaming. 3 weeks ago, my grandfather looked me directly in the eye and gave me specific instructions. The account book, the chess manual, only you. That wasn't a confused elderly man. That was a man with a plan. That was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The second call came at 6:30 that evening. Amanda, my sister, who hadn't voluntarily contacted me in 8 months, suddenly wanted to chat. My sister calling to check on me was about as natural as a cat offering to prepare your taxes. The last time Amanda voluntarily contacted me was 4 years ago to ask if I still had Dad's golf clubs. I did. She took them. I never saw them again. Some patterns you learn to recognize. "Hey, Rach," she said, her voice too casual, too friendly. "Mom mentioned you've been asking about Grandpa's belongings. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," I said. "Just processing everything." She hummed sympathetically, then carefully. "You know, Grandpa didn't really have much, right? The farmhouse, some furniture. Mom and I already discussed it. She's going to handle the sale. I'll manage the property matters. You don't need to worry about any of it." And there it was. They'd already divided everything. Helen gets the money, Amanda gets the property, Rachel gets nothing. They assumed I would simply accept it. They assumed I wouldn't ask questions. Her parting words, "Just let it go, Rach. You know how Mom gets. It's not worth the conflict." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and considered the timing. Helen called at 9:45. Amanda called at 6:30. Nearly 9 hours apart. Almost like they were coordinating. Almost like they were checking what I knew, confirming their stories, ensuring their deceptions were aligned. They were frightened of something. This is exactly why I maintain records of everything. Every conversation, every date, every detail. Working at a law firm teaches you that memories fade, but documentation is forever. I transcribed both calls word for word. Time, duration, exact phrases. I examined the account book again, at my grandfather's note, at the account number that was too modern for the old leather cover. Tomorrow, I was taking a personal day. I was going to that bank. I was going to discover what my grandfather had hidden, and whatever my mother was so desperate to keep buried, I was going to expose it to the light. I took a personal day from work, which my supervisor granted with minimal inquiry. One benefit of rarely taking time off is that people don't question when you finally do. The drive to the bank took 90 minutes. Community Federal Savings had been acquired by a larger institution years ago, but the main branch still existed in a small town called Riverside. It was the kind of place with one traffic light and a diner that had probably been serving the same coffee since 1978. I walked into the bank at 9:20, carrying the account book, my identification, my grandfather's death certificate, and documents proving family relationship. I expected nothing. Perhaps a few $100s in a forgotten account, perhaps just answers. The young teller at the counter smiled when I approached. She accepted the account book, examined it with polite curiosity, and entered the account number into her computer. Her smile disappeared. She excused herself, made a phone call in the back office, spoke in hushed tones I couldn't hear. 25 minutes passed. I sat in the lobby watching the clock, beginning to feel foolish. Perhaps Helen was correct. Perhaps this was nothing. Perhaps I'd driven 90 minutes for an empty account and a dead end. I sat in that lobby long enough to learn the security guard's entire life story. His name was Dennis. He was training for a marathon. His wife made him give up dairy. I've never seen a man look so despondent while standing 4 feet from a bowl of complimentary mints. Then a man in an expensive suit appeared, tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that was professionally neutral. He introduced himself as Robert Caldwell, regional manager. He requested I come to his private office. His hands were slightly unsteady when he accepted the account book from me. He examined it like it might detonate. Then, he sat down heavily in his leather chair and released a long breath. "Miss Morrison," he said carefully, "this account is flagged in our system." I felt my stomach drop. Flagged? That word never signifies anything positive. "Not because of anything you've done," he continued. "Because of its history." He explained that the account wasn't from 1968, despite what the vintage account book cover suggested. It was opened in 2012. My grandfather had deliberately used the antique cover to disguise it, to conceal it. The account was a high-yield savings instrument with compound interest. It had remained untouched for 12 years. The current balance was... He wrote a number on paper and slid it across the desk. $1,847,623. When I saw that number, I made a sound that can only be described as what happens when you accidentally sit on a cat. Part gasp, part wheeze, part desperate need to lie down. The bank manager offered me water. I needed something considerably stronger. $1.8 million. My grandfather, who everyone believed had nothing, who lived in a modest farmhouse and wore the same 4 sweaters for 18 years, had $1.8 million hidden in an account no one knew about. But Robert Caldwell wasn't celebrating with me. His expression was growing more concerned, not less. "There's something else," he said. "In 2017, someone attempted to access this account. They had power of attorney documents for Martin Morrison. They had what appeared to be his signature authorizing the transfer, but our verification system flagged inconsistencies in the documentation. The signatures didn't quite match our records. The access was denied, and the attempt was logged in our security system." My mouth was dry. "Who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Caldwell consulted his papers. "The person who attempted access was listed as Helen Morrison." He paused. "Is that a relative of yours?" My mother. My mother tried to steal this money 8 years ago. She failed, but she tried." Caldwell made more calls. More people arrived. A woman from their security division, a man from legal. They retrieved records from their archives and from other banks where my grandfather had maintained accounts. The picture that emerged was devastating. My grandfather had money, significant money, an inheritance from his own parents back in 1998, carefully invested and grown over the years. By 2011, when my father died and Helen became Grandpa's caretaker, he had accumulated over $900,000 across various accounts. Helen discovered them, and over 4 years, from 2012 to 2016, she drained them, transfer by transfer, withdrawal by withdrawal, using power of attorney documents and signatures that appeared authentic but weren't. She stole approximately $1.3 million from my grandfather. But Martin was an accountant. He noticed. He couldn't stop her legally because she'd convinced the courts he was mentally incompetent. He couldn't contact the police because no one believed a confused old man over his devoted daughter-in-law. He was trapped, so he did the only thing he could. He hid what was left. In 2012, when he realized what was happening, he secretly opened this account, transferred $900,000 into it, used the vintage account book cover to disguise it, told no one. This account was his insurance policy, his final move in a chess game against a woman who had stolen everything else from him. Caldwell looked at me with something like respect. "There's one more thing you should know," he said. "In 2021, your grandfather filed a formal complaint with our fraud department. He claimed his daughter-in-law was stealing from him. He said no one would believe him because he'd been declared mentally incompetent." He paused. "We couldn't proceed without the original account documentation, without proof that he had assets she wasn't supposed to access. Without this," he held up the account book. "Your grandfather was trying to prove he was being robbed. And now, you've just brought us the evidence he couldn't provide while he was alive." I sat in that leather chair, holding my dead grandfather's secret, and I finally understood. Martin hadn't surrendered. He hadn't given in to confusion or despair. He'd spent 8 years building a case, preparing evidence, waiting for the right moment. And he'd left the key with the one person he trusted to finish what he started, me. Caldwell reached for his phone. "Miss Morrison," he said, "I need to contact our security division, and I think we'll need to involve law enforcement. This account is evidence of serious financial crimes." I nodded slowly. I'd come here expecting nothing. Perhaps a few $100s, perhaps closure. Instead, I found $1.8 million and proof that my mother was a thief. And somewhere, I was absolutely certain my grandfather was smiling. If you're still with me on this journey, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means everything, and I promise the best part of the story is still coming. The police arrived at the bank within 90 minutes of Robert Caldwell's call. 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Division, both carrying notebooks and the kind of expressions that suggested they'd seen this before. Elder financial abuse, they called it. One of the fastest growing crimes in America, and the perpetrators are almost always family. The lead detective was a woman named Sharon Bennett. Early 40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. She'd been working financial crimes for 14 years. And she told me something that stayed with me. These cases break my heart every time, she said, because the victims are trapped. They depend on the people who are stealing from them. They love the people who are hurting them. And when they try to speak up, nobody believes them. She looked at the account book in my hands. Your grandfather fought back the only way he could. With documentation, with evidence, with patience. The investigation moved quickly after that. Caldwell provided the bank's records. The 2017 access attempt was documented in detail. The forged signatures, the fraudulent power of attorney, the security flags that had stopped the transfer. It was all there, preserved in the bank's digital archives, like evidence in amber. But that was just the beginning. 4 days after my visit to the bank, I received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was old but steady. He introduced himself as Thomas Whitaker, attorney at law, 73 years old, and Martin Morrison's friend for over 35 years. Your grandfather gave me specific instructions, he said. If he died, I was to contact you, only you, no one else in the family. He was very clear about that. I drove to his office that afternoon. It was a small practice in a quiet part of town, the kind of place where attorneys still had wooden bookshelves and framed diplomas from decades past. Whitaker met me at the door, tall, slightly stooped with age, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were kind. Martin and I played chess together for 35 years, he said. He was the most methodical man I ever knew. When he came to me in 2022 and told me what was happening, I believed him immediately, because Martin didn't make accusations lightly, and he didn't come empty-handed. He led me to his office and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. Your grandfather spent 3 years building this, he said. He knew no one would believe him while he was alive, so he prepared for afterward. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was everything. Copies of the forged power of attorney documents, side by side with examples of my grandfather's actual signature. The differences were subtle but clear, once you knew what to look for. The loops were too perfect, the pressure too even. My mother had traced his signature, probably from documents she had access to, and she'd done it well enough to fool most people, but not well enough to fool a bank's verification system, and not well enough to fool an accountant who'd spent 38 years spotting discrepancies. There were bank statements, transaction records, a detailed log in my grandfather's handwriting, documenting every suspicious withdrawal, every transfer he hadn't authorized, every lie my mother had told to cover her tracks, dates, amounts, account numbers, 3 years of meticulous documentation, and at the bottom of the folder, in a sealed envelope, was a notarized sworn statement dated 2023. I read it slowly, my grandfather's voice echoing in my mind with every word. He described everything. How Helen had taken control of his finances after his son died in 2011. How she'd convinced doctors he was showing signs of dementia when he wasn't. How she'd isolated him from the outside world, controlling his phone calls, his visitors, his access to information. How she'd stolen from him systematically for years, while pretending to be his devoted caretaker. His final words in the statement hit me like a physical blow. I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I am doing. I am leaving this evidence for my granddaughter, Rachel, because she is the only one who will do what is right. She has always asked the questions that others were afraid to ask. I trust her to finish what I could not. Asterisk. I sat in that office and cried, not from sadness, from something harder to name. Pride, perhaps, and grief for all the years he'd spent alone, knowing the truth, unable to make anyone believe him. Detective Bennett called me the next day with more news. And this time, it wasn't about my mother. We've been examining the money trail, she said, where the stolen funds went after they left your grandfather's accounts. And we found something interesting about your sister Amanda Fawn, Golden Child Amanda, with her designer clothes and her investment portfolio and her smug certainty that she was superior to everyone else. She didn't just receive money from your mother, Bennett continued. She created a shell company, Hartley Investments, LLC, registered using her middle name. Over $480,000 was laundered through that company over 4 years. She wasn't an innocent beneficiary, Miss Morrison. She was an active participant in the scheme. My sister, who had called me to tell me to let it go. My sister, who had laughed at me for being sentimental. My sister had helped my mother steal from our grandfather and had built her entire lifestyle on the proceeds. Her house, her car, her investments, all of it was stolen money, hidden behind corporate paperwork and family deception. But the revelations weren't finished. Bennett's team ran background checks on everyone involved. Standard procedure, she said. And they found something in my mother's past that explained everything. In 2005, Helen's own mother had died. The woman had approximately $175,000 in savings. When the estate was settled, there was almost nothing left. Other family members had suspected something at the time, but they couldn't prove it. The money had simply vanished. My mother had done this before, to her own mother, 18 years before she did it to Martin. And my grandfather had known. That was why he never trusted her. That was why he'd been so careful, so methodical, so prepared. He'd seen her pattern. He knew what she was capable of. And he'd spent his final years ensuring she wouldn't get away with it a second time. Detective Bennett asked me to cooperate fully with the investigation, which meant keeping quiet, not warning my mother, not confronting my sister, attending family gatherings, and pretending everything was normal while the case was built around them. 3 weeks of deception, 3 weeks of sitting across from people who had stolen from my grandfather, smiled at his memorial, and divided his estate like vultures picking at a carcass. Sunday dinner at my mother's house was torture. My mother's roast has always been a crime against poultry, but that night it felt appropriate. Here I was, choking down evidence of poor judgment, while sitting across from a woman who had made poor judgment her entire career. Helen discussed the farmhouse sale. She'd found a buyer, good price, quick closing. Amanda nodded along, mentioned a new investment opportunity she was excited about. They were so confident, so certain they'd gotten away with everything. After dinner, Helen pulled me aside. Her voice was soft, concerned, maternal, the performance of a lifetime. I know we don't always see eye to eye, she said, but we're family. Your grandfather would want us to stick together, to support each other. I kept my face neutral. Of course, Mom, family first. For 3 weeks, I had to pretend I didn't know my mother was essentially a white-collar criminal. Every time she called to complain about her neighbor's lawn or the price of groceries, I wanted to say, "You know what else is expensive, Mom? Federal prison." But I waited. I documented. I trusted the process. My grandfather taught me chess when I was 8. His favorite lesson: the best move isn't always the obvious one. Sometimes you sacrifice a piece to win the game. He had sacrificed his final years setting this trap. He knew he wouldn't see it spring, but he knew I would. The call came on a Monday morning. Detective Bennett's voice was calm and professional. "Miss Morrison, we're executing the warrants today. Arrests will be simultaneous. I thought you'd want to know." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence for a long moment. My mother was about to lose everything. My sister was about to learn that betrayal has a price. And my grandfather's patience was finally about to pay off. The arrests happened at 7:15 in the morning, coordinated to the minute. No warning, no opportunity for them to contact each other, coordinate stories, or destroy evidence. Detective Bennett had planned it perfectly. I wasn't there, but Bennett told me the details later, and I have to admit, there was a certain satisfaction in hearing them. My mother answered her door, still in her bathrobe, coffee cup in hand. She saw the badges and the uniforms, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I imagine she looked like a woman watching her entire world collapse in slow motion. Detective Bennett presented the warrant. Read the charges: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, theft. My mother tried one last manipulation. Her voice was steady, reasonable, the voice of a woman who'd talked her way out of trouble her entire life. "This is a mistake," she said. "My father-in-law was mentally unwell. He didn't know what he was saying. I was trying to protect him." Bennett wasn't impressed. "Ma'am, we have 3 years of documented evidence. A notarized statement from your father-in-law, witnessed by an attorney, bank records of your attempted access to an account you didn't know existed, and a paper trail showing exactly where the money went. This isn't a mistake. This is consequences." My mother was handcuffed and walked to the police car. No screaming, no dramatic scene, just the quiet death of a lie that had lasted 13 years. Across town, at the same moment, my sister was in her office. She was in a meeting with clients when the officers walked in. I heard she went completely pale, tried to explain that there must be some confusion, tried to mention her attorney. The officers weren't interested in negotiation. Amanda was cuffed in front of her colleagues. Her reputation died in that moment. Whatever she'd built, whatever image she'd cultivated, it was gone. You don't recover from being arrested for money laundering in your own conference room. The case moved through the courts over the following months. I attended some of the hearings, watched the evidence accumulate, watched my mother's confident expression slowly crumble as the scope of the prosecution's case became clear. Her attorney tried everything, claimed Martin was mentally incompetent, so his statement was invalid. The prosecution brought in 4 doctors who had examined my grandfather over the years. All 4 testified that Martin showed no signs of dementia. He was sharp, coherent, aware. The incompetency ruling, they explained, had been based on false information provided by Helen herself. She'd convinced the courts her father-in-law was losing his mind so that no one would believe him when he said she was stealing from him. The judge was not sympathetic. Amanda's attorney tried a different approach. He came to me privately with an offer. Amanda would testify against our mother in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed she'd been manipulated, that she didn't know the full scope of what was happening, that she was a victim too. The attorney delivered Amanda's message carefully. Your sister says she wants to make things right. She's willing to cooperate fully. I thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. Tell my sister that our grandfather taught me chess, I said. And in chess, you don't negotiate with pawns. It didn't matter anyway. The prosecutors weren't interested in Amanda's cooperation. The shell company proved she wasn't a passive recipient of family generosity. She'd created corporate structures to hide stolen money. She'd signed documents, she'd made transfers, she knew exactly where the money came from, and she'd helped conceal it. No deal. Full charges. The sentencing hearing was on a cold day in March, 4 months after the arrests. Federal courthouse. Wood-paneled walls. The American flag hanging behind the judge's bench. Before the sentences were read, the prosecutor asked to present a statement from the victim, from Martin. The courtroom went quiet as she read his words aloud. My daughter-in-law stole my money and my dignity. She convinced the world I was losing my mind, while she emptied my life savings. No one believed me. But I am not confused. I know exactly what is being done to me, and I am leaving a record so that one day the truth will come out. I watched my mother's face as those words filled the room. She stared straight ahead, expressionless, but her hands were shaking. Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident, successful sister who had always looked down on me was gone. In her place was just a woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost. The judge delivered the sentences. Helen Morrison, 6 years in federal prison, no possibility of early parole, full restitution ordered. Everything she owned would be liquidated and returned to the estate. Amanda Morrison, 2.5 years in federal prison, felony conviction that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her investment career, her professional reputation, her carefully constructed image of success, all of it was over. I sat in that courtroom and felt something I didn't expect. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet sense of completion, like a book finally reaching its last chapter. After the hearing, Detective Bennett found me in the hallway. Your grandfather would be proud, she said. He fought for years. You finished it. I thanked her, shook her hand, and walked out of the courthouse into the cold March air. Later, Amanda's attorney called me one more time, asked if I would consider visiting my sister in prison. He said Amanda wanted to apologize, wanted to explain. I said I'd think about it. Amanda's attorney actually asked if I'd visit her in prison. I said I'd think about it. I'm still thinking. It's been 7 months. I'll probably keep thinking. Some apologies come too late to matter. Some explanations don't deserve to be heard. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Whitaker, my grandfather's attorney. Your grandfather left something else for you. One final item. When you're ready, come to my office. One more surprise. One more move from beyond the grave. Martin wasn't finished yet. I visited Thomas Whitaker's office 3 days after the sentencing. The March wind was bitter, but the sun was bright. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Whitaker was waiting for me, with tea and a single envelope on his desk. My name was written on the front, in my grandfather's precise handwriting. He asked me to give this to you after everything was resolved, Whitaker said. He was very specific about the timing. He wanted you to read it when you could appreciate what it meant. I took the envelope. It felt light, just paper, but I knew it contained something heavy. Before I opened it, Whitaker explained the legal outcome. The $1.8 million in the hidden account was now mine. Martin's will, kept safely with Whitaker for years, explicitly named me as the sole beneficiary. My mother and sister were specifically excluded, with documentation explaining why. Additionally, The restitution process had begun. Assets seized from Helen and Amanda would be liquidated and added to the estate. The farmhouse sale proceeds, which my mother had planned to keep for herself, would come to me instead. Total inheritance, once everything was processed, would be approximately $2.2 million. I nodded. But the money felt abstract, distant. What I really wanted was in that envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside were 3 pages covered front and back in my grandfather's handwriting. The letter was dated 6 weeks before his death. My dearest Rachel, it began, if you're reading this, then you found the account book. You followed the trail. You did what I knew you would do. I want you to understand why I chose you. Your sister was always her mother's daughter. I watched her grow up, learning Helen's values, taking shortcuts, believing that the ends justify the means. I hoped she would change, but hope is not a strategy. An accountant knows better than to trust hope. Your mother never loved me. She loved what I represented: security, respectability, access to resources she could control. When your father died, God rest his soul, she saw an opportunity. An old man with money and no one to protect him. She thought I was an easy target. She was wrong. I knew what she was doing almost from the beginning. I'm an accountant, Rachel. I spent 38 years tracking numbers, finding discrepancies, identifying fraud. Did she really think I wouldn't notice my own money disappearing? But I was trapped. She had the legal authority. She'd convinced everyone I was losing my mind. Every time I tried to fight back, she tightened her grip. Every time I tried to speak up, she silenced me. So I did what I do best. I documented. I prepared. I waited. Truth is patient, Rachel. It outlasts every deception. I hid what I could, built the evidence, left instructions with Thomas, and I trusted you to finish what I started. You were always different from the rest of them. You visited me because you wanted to, not because you expected something. You played chess with me for the game, not for the inheritance. You asked questions that made your mother uncomfortable. You never accepted easy answers. That's why I chose you. Because I knew that when you found the account book, you wouldn't stop until you found the truth. And I knew that when you found the truth, you would do what was right. I'm sorry for the burden I've left you. I'm sorry you have to be the one to expose your own family. I know it won't be easy. I know there will be pain, but I also know you're strong enough to carry it. Live well, Rachel. Use the money for something that matters. Build something that lasts. Be happy. I spent my last years fighting a battle I couldn't win, but I made sure you would win it for me. Thank you for being the granddaughter I always hoped for. With all my love, Grandpa Martin. I sat in Thomas Whitaker's office and let the tears come. Not sad tears. Something deeper, something that felt like healing. My grandfather had seen me, really seen me with Soaz. In a family where I'd always felt like an outsider, he'd recognized something true in me. And he trusted me with the most important thing he had left. Not just money, justice. That was 7 months ago. I quit my job at the law firm, paid off my debts, bought a small building downtown, a narrow storefront with large windows and good light. I opened a bookshop, the kind of place with comfortable chairs and the smell of coffee and shelves full of stories waiting to be discovered. I named it Morrison's Pages, which my grandfather would have found amusing. He always appreciated a good pun. In the back corner, there's a chess table, 2 chairs, a board with the pieces set up and ready. Sometimes customers sit down and play. Sometimes I join them. Above the table hangs a framed photograph of my grandfather. And next to it, in a simple wooden frame, his favorite saying, "Truth is patient, it outlasts every deception." My mother writes letters from prison sometimes. Long rambling letters, full of blame and excuses and demands for forgiveness. She says I betrayed the family. She says I ruined everything. She says I owe her. I don't respond. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. Amanda's wife left her. Her friends disappeared. When she gets out of prison, she'll have a felony record and nothing to show for all those years of supposed success. The people who had everything, because they stole it now, have nothing. And me? I have a bookshop. I have peace. I have the knowledge that my grandfather spent his final years fighting for justice, and I was the one who delivered it. Thank you so much for watching.